Hi listeners, Quinn here, putting this out front to let you know about the official Failure to Launch merch store. If you've ever wanted to wear or display space history, you can find clothes and posters at failuretolaunch.bigcartel.com. We've got all kinds of wonderful art like the Apollo Engineering Ronin, Jack Parsons Tarot card, and the First Orbital War 1988. If any of that sounds good to you, you can find a link below in the description. Thank you, and here's the show.
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak. 4, 3, 2, 1. Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through all the mistakes, failures, and explosions that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Gareth, he, him.
And a melting Chris, he, him.
And today, we're talking about the convoluted and dumb world of space logistics. That is, what actually happens to a rocket before it gets to the launch pad. And we have got a guest. Gareth Dennis is a railway engineer and author and the host of the RailNatter podcast, the world's leading independent railway podcast. He's also a frequent guest on such shows as Trash Future and, well, There's Your Problem. So, Gareth, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It is an absolute delight. It's another example of me listening to my own one of my favorite podcasts. I mean, in fact, last year, statistically, my favorite podcast, but it talks back at me when I say things, which is a strange experience to get a grip on. No, an absolute delight to be here. It's very, very cool to be on. It's funny, like, actually, space was my first love before railways, believe it or not. I had this space book that I adored, and I was obsessed with space. So in another world, maybe I'd have been a space rather than a trains person. But
well, today we're going to see if there's enough overlap to see either A, if that's still an option, or B, if you basically are.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, and it's also funny because we're talking of space and the way that space works. We're both kind of spinning around on the edges of the galaxy, or rather the universe that is the Nate Bethea extended universe.
The planetoids of the Bethea-verse.
Yeah, exactly.
I always like to consider ourselves.
So, and I suppose I'm like a perma-host on, like a kind of I'm no longer really guest status when I'm on WTOIP.
Asteroid.
So I'm kind of like,
yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's fun to podcast, folks.
I think either Phobos or Deimos used to be an asteroid, and then Mars just kind of scooped it up and like grabbed hold forever. Yeah, we can keep analogizing forever.
Yeah, well, in a way, yeah, it's kind of right, because like when the current rail minister in the UK had me sacked, I kind of was scooped into the orbit of W2IP. If W2IP is Mars, which if it was going to be any planet, I do think W2IP is Mars.
Well, but also God of War could potentially be LLBD. I don't know. Yeah, like at some point we will have to fully figure this out, and we will have to integrate, like, you know, obviously space bias. I want it to be a planetary system, but like we do need to integrate more themes from other shows into this.
Yeah, we're going to need to like hire time on the Large Hadron Collider to get this thing sussed. Yeah, exactly.
But following through with this does like Pluto got demoted. Pluto was a planet and then it became not one. I wonder if that could conceively which podcast is going to get demoted out? That?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Everyone's going to have to Fortnite chicken dinner their way back into the universe.
Oh,
yeah. Now all the podcasters that have at some point in their life sent a wave file to Nate Bethea are now looking over their shoulder, desperately worried. Yeah, that's it.
Forget a wave file. How about like a crunchy MP3 from so-called professionals?
Just like the crunchiest D-res thing you can imagine.
Oh man, yeah, that is what we do here in podcasting. It's fine. I get the excuse that my full-time day job is as I'm a concrete and steel guy, so I feel like I have an excuse to fall back on here.
I just scream at aluminum, so I can't say much either.
Yeah, you use the toucher. Capital T, capital other T.
Well, I mean, technically I turn it into the scanner, but that's another thing entirely.
Well, it touches things first, so it's the toucher, sorry.
Yeah, and I definitely do feel that like train nerds and rocket nerds share a kinship in that, like, I fully admit I have not been a train nerd in the sense that like I cannot look at a train engine and identify it, one from another kind of thing, but I can do that with nearly identical rockets. So I feel like that is a superpower that these two kinds of, like can rattle off a 30-digit acronym of a random train or a random rocket that looks identical to every single other one out there, and no one else in the aviation or like just industry world understands any of it,
Yeah, say 317 to me and I know what you mean. Yeah, like, exactly. I don't know why my brain is wired for that to just have a load, for that to like open a Wikipedia page in my mind's eye.
Right.
But yes, exactly. There are certain trigger words.
When I found out that Gareth was coming back on, I went to one of my favorite Wikipedia articles, aka multiplex locomotives.
Well, of course, behind me, the listeners cannot see because this is an audio-only format, but I have a PR401A, and above me I have NFC 1504, of course. So there, I'm surrounded by stuff and junk. It's I'm
see
very
about turning the camera, you can kind of see it back there. That is my large collection of bootleg Chinese Lego
bootleg
rockets.
Chinese Lego. Yes, excellent.
I don't have the Saturn V actually built, but yeah, like I was trying to get more rockets in that same size, and it's like, well, the only place to get it is China.
So I have two things downstairs, or rather two collections of things that are not yet assembled. One of them is a Lego ISS, official bona fide Lego. So
nice.
Denmark, don't kill me. And the second is a whole bunch of like Vanish Oxy-Action tubs, which are the right radius, and a whole bunch of like white loo rolls, which are the right radius, for my daughter and I to build a from scratch rocket. The ISS is me and my wife, the Lego. The junk, the like crap that should just be in the recycling, is what my daughter and I are building a big rocket out of, and she is so pumped for it.
That sounds awesome.
Some of the first things she watched, like the first movie bit that she ever watched, was the launch sequence from, actually, I think it was Apollo 11, the documentary, actually, and then quickly followed by Apollo 13, which she says, can we watch the astronauts spitting, please? Referring, of course, to Fred Hayes upchucking once they hit orbit. So, this is a space household as much as it is a railway household. And
like I've said before, most of the time I am not in favor of parents kind of like picking paths for their kids and stuff like that, except if it's engineering. I think every engineer has a right, if I live near you, I've given Lego to the family down the hallway for me in a bid to try and get their daughter to become an engineer.
Yes.
Hey kid, you want some connects?
That's the only good kind of evangelism, right?
Exactly.
The irony being that I'm trying to mainstream on the rockets to try and not mainstream on trains, on railways. I'm trying to no, I'm not going to make her a railways person. I'm going to get her excited about engineering, but through an alternative medium that I can get equally animated about. Hence, letting her watch rocket launches, which she enjoys watching. She enjoyed watching the Artemis 2. Actually, she was like, "Oh, it's a big orange one." She enjoyed that.
Oh, that was a fun one to watch because the stream, everyone got so spoiled on SpaceX and stuff. It was like, oh, the cameras suck. Like, why even launch it if it's not so pretty?
SpaceX was spoiled on the original bloody Apollo launches. It's
that too.
Why did the absolute money shot, everything blacked out? I was like, what are you doing? That did irritate me after that. I was watching it live here.
It wasn't all there at the same time, but it's they've got a downlink budget and whatnot. So I was telling people the whole time of just wait a day. They have the good cameras. They're just showing you they're not showing you the HD right now.
It's true. It is true. And I look forward to the super. Well, actually, it's funny because a lot of random YouTube, space YouTubers have instantly got, as soon as those files dropped into public domain, the supercuts were appearing on YouTube in seconds. How on earth they managed that, I don't know, but that was good. So I was straight in there and just wasted 3 hours of my life just watching supercuts of Artemis 2 launching. Anyway, we've already got sidetracked in true FTL and Rail Natter style. But in fact, you guys are far better at not getting sidetracked than I am. So in true Rail Natter style, we got sidetracked.
Oh no, beautiful. I just sometimes cut that. We go
the magic of the Thanos snap in editing.
Yeah, there's actually a third Chris that I cut every single time. Listener, you have never heard him, but he's here. See, that was him right there. Cut him.
Yeah, cut out, gone. Yeah, lost.
Yeah, we occasionally speak in the manner for.
You're not
funny.
No, that's not. No, that you can't be in the episode.
That was exceptionally racist. My God.
Usually it takes us about 45 to 50 minutes before we actually talk about the episode content.
It's true.
So we started recording 31 minutes ago. We are
beautiful.
halfway through the intro.
Oh, I'm so sorry. They edit already. Okay, right. Crikey.
No,
right.
no,
Okay.
this will be good. This will be good.
That's why we're here. It's the love of the game.
A little bit more than just a normal FTL episode. We think this is going to be a bit of a collab, since we have both sides have brought something to the table here, except for the Chris's, and we are going to be kind of taking a look at rocket logistics. Brackets. I think neither of us have actually delved into like a full description of how rocket logistics work on either side, the East or West, and have instead focused on like a fun thing that we want to complain about.
That's correct. Yeah, what we've done here is provide. Yeah, like, well, actually, you know what? It's the strategy view of history, and it's the same technology, which is you can't illuminate a whole lot. What you do is you go out and you paddle out into the ocean, you drop a little bucket, you bring a little amount up, and you describe the bucket, and that gives people a glimpse into what they could be learning. And you know what? We're going to be spilling the messy contents of that bucket all over your podcasting ears today. Oh, Christ, yes. That was horrible. That's what we're going to do.
The only difference being that, like, normally you could say that the bucket is like a decent representative of the whole content, you know, of a bucket. You take a bucket out of the ocean, it's going to have a bit of the ocean in it. We are pulling up the worst parts in that bucket. We are showing you the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and I left a lot of jello in the bucket before I dipped it into the ocean as well. So yeah, it's this is
the pond scum at the bottom, listener.
We're pulling up
we couldn't afford
an ocean. The leeches.
Yeah, we couldn't afford an ocean going boat, so we just kind of pushed like a half rowing boat into a sludgy pond at the bottom of the garden. Yeah, exactly. That's the FTL promise.
We're pulling up something that can only be described as the gunch.
But there is such delight to be found in this gunch. It's beautiful.
It's the slop. Yeah. It's beautiful.
And listener, whenever we say rocket logistics, we generally mean that, like, you know, rockets don't tend to get produced at launch sites. Cape Canaveral, Baikonur, Vandenberg, Zichang. Oh my God, Zichang. I have it in my notes here, Zichang, my beloved, because everything wrong with China, like Zichang is the sacrificial anode of China's space program, because everything that goes wrong there happens at this one launch site, and every other launch site just kind of goes fine.
You've not done a dedicated Zichang episode yet, right?
No, we have not. No, we have not. I apologize for that.
I look forward to it. There are going to be a few things in this episode, I think, where I say, this will be a future FTL series.
Yes.
Hey, kid, do you want a booster?
and yeah, none of these launch sites produce their own rockets. They are all produced off-site at factories and shipped in. And that does mean that there is a rocket supply chain of how all of this equipment gets to the site. It's normally assembled on site, you know, yada, yada. That's what we're going to be talking about here. This wonderful, fucked up world of rocket manufacturing, rocket transporting, all of that stuff. And I think starting off with the West and then going to the East, Gareth, you've prepared a section on a bit of like NASA logistics, correct?
I have. What's funny here is that as the person who lives most in the East, I'm covering the West, and as decidedly North American continental ears, you're covering the East, which is tremendous fun. I don't know how this ended up happening, but I'll tell you what is you have better access to good references because you've done so many good Soviet episodes that like it obviously makes sense for it to be that way around.
See, I was going to say it would be to prevent bias, so that we have to be talking about the place furthest from us.
That's true. That is a good point.
In order to like not get some rose-tinted glasses. But also, yeah, I just love talking about Soviet politics. So of course, I grabbed that one.
I love the fact you before we started recording, I love the fact you were describing that you had a nice structure, you had a fairly straightforward sort of, you know, it's going to be a much more like ABC, give you a bit of a high level view of like rocket logistics through the lens of, and then what did you discover in a way that you have on multiple previous episodes, which is actually you get lost in the glorious Soviet bullshit and the interplay in politics. Just delicious.
That renders the engineering almost pointless.
Yeah, and essentially not hugely interesting by comparison to the knives out sisters being slept with type bullshit that you get when you throw OKBs at each other. Yeah. So my bit is kind of actually, you know what? My bit is it makes this an FTL episode with some level of like coherence to the current story, because it, in a way, is a major part of the story why Artemis is like that. Given that the Space Launch System is like a weird, clunky series of odd lumps, because it's basically like a transformerified space shuttle for like military industrial complex sustenance reasons, right? So it has pertinence to the lovely Artemis 2 launch that all of us enjoyed watching recently.
We need to keep all of these horrible little companies fed.
They must eat, and therefore we must create the thing.
You must let me build my washer halfway across the country. It will cost you $50 for absolute nonsense. Are you ready?
Listen, you know our track records. We are good at making O-rings. You have to let us be doing this. What's your other option?
What are you going to do? Not accept my contract?
So to do this, though, we have to go to the one time when my actual engineering discipline, people may have parachutes as their engineering discipline, right? Others have track as their engineering discipline. And the one time where track and the space industry collided is in a stupid and extremely annoying viral email chain that became a Twitter thread more recently about the connection between track, horses' arse, Roman chariots, which aren't a fucking thing, and the size of the space shuttle boosters. And this whole story is bullshit, but it allows us to annotate and pick out some things that are interesting, because this story is not interesting, and it helps us to understand why the real story is much more interesting and in lots of ways more stupid.
The NASA Railroad.
Are you guys familiar with this thread, by the way? Are you familiar with this
Yes.
email chain thing?
I'm personally not. However,
Okay,
I
cool.
will say this, listener, go on the RailNet or YouTube, scroll through and prepare for a jump scare of a thumbnail that I am amazed YouTube did not take down.
Oh yeah. I did put a
A full-on horse's ass.
highly aggravated horse's rectum
Yes.
on as a thumbnail. I was trying to see what I could get away with, and
It worked.
It's puckering. It's puckering, folks.
Chiming in to say that I too am here and have not read this email
Dang.
or know the context of what we're referring to
No
and how
details.
that has anything to do with the horse's asshole.
So I'm going to tell this story, and I'm going to do so hopefully in a way that's both reasonably quick and also allows you to understand where things are nonsense. I will do this mildly with the help of a loud horn, an annoying "this is wrong" horn. So very quickly, this thread is like 500 words long. It was done as a Twitter thread with a bunch of extremely rationed pixel pictures that aggravated me as well by some guy who was like a nobody Twitter account that just appeared, did this, and then disappeared into the ether again. So essentially, it's tying the idea that, and I quote, US standard railroad gauge, which isn't really a thing, but anyway, is 4 feet 8.5 inches, which is correct, that it's a strange number, and it's because of a sequence of things. And lots of the track stuff about this is wrong. So it's saying the first railways were built in England. No, they weren't. They absolutely were not. It talks about the fact that wagonways were set to a certain size because they used wagons that ran in old roads that were grooved because of Roman chariots. That's utter horseshit on a number of levels. Oh wait, I need to go like this. No, that's the gamer horns.
Do it. That makes it
there we go.
correct.
No, that's so not the gamer horns.
Retroactively.
Yeah, oh damn it. Right, so the false start is basically we had wagonways in the UK since the mid 1500s. Wagonways had been around and tracks had been around in mainland Europe before that for a long time, and actually traced right back to the Romans. Whenever you have rutted roads, Roman rutted roads, those weren't because of wagon wheels wearing a hole. It's because the Romans actively cut those grooves to basically act as a primitive form of railway. The earliest railways were not in Britain. They were not in the middle of Europe. They were in southern Italy as part of those Roman cities where they had essentially tramways carved into limestone.
Okay, cool.
There's a whole history on it that I'm currently helping an actual historian to write. It's fascinating. They even put iron on them to make them actual iron roads. Iron railroads. Anyway, that's for the future. The point is that those ruts have no connection to the design of trains in the modern era or standard gauge track, not least because there isn't really a standard gauge track in the US. Loads of them were imported, and only the Civil War, the good guys won, resulted in a standardization of track gauge.
Actually, the cause of the war, they tell you it was the slaves. It wasn't. It was
Nothing to that.
improper
It was all
track
about
gauge.
track gauge. Yeah, exactly. So all of that is nonsense. Also, Romans didn't have chariots. Chariots were not a technology that were a successful thing by that point. The Greeks had them for a bit. Romans just had cavalry. Come on, if we want to get two lines with it, but it's just, this thing is rubbish.
It definitely does make sense, but anytime I'm thinking of the military technology of antiquity, I always find it so funny of the idea of no, this is obsolete.
Have they not played Age of Empires? The chariots are not a thing by the time you get to Roman times. Come on.
I want to see the interwar period, between World War I, World War II. No one knows where weapons are going to go next. Everyone's just getting freaky with it. In between wars, people must have made the dumbest chariots. People must have covered horses head to toe in armor with 2-foot spikes coming out of them.
The interwar chariot, huh?
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's got a ton of armor, but the guy riding it has like a pointy stick at best.
So this whole like email chain thing, it like says, therefore, the United States standard railroad gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches is derived from the original specifications for an Imperial Roman war chariot. No. My fat thumbs. There, 2 beeps. No, bad. It's wrong. Right, that's utter horseshit. Roman war chariots didn't exist. But that is railway stuff. What's even more stupid is how that starts getting tied into the size and capability of the shuttle. Because the idea is that track gauge and loading gauge, track gauge, distance between the rails, loading gauge, the space around the railway within which you can fit shit. Okay. The idea that those two are directly connected is also false, because as anyone who travels in Britain knows, our trains are teeny tiny, and in the US your trains are massive, and they have the same track gauge. We're running on the same dimension between the rails. It's just that the US
the train kind of splurges out of the cross section of the actual rails. Okay, gotcha.
Turns out you can just make your train bigger. You could just do that. You could just do that on the same tracks. And everyone in North America, Canada, the US, Mexico, all realized you could just make your tunnels bigger and not have teeny tiny trains like we have in Britain. So that's the next bit that is the next part of this stupid thread goes, well, the space shuttle has the 2 booster rockets attached to the side. Yes, made by Thiokol at their factory in Utah. Well, when this thread was posted, Thiokol very decidedly did not exist anymore. But anyway, that's kind of by the by. That gives the vintage of this sort of email thing.
Yeah.
Here's the quote from the thread. The engineers who designed the SRBs would have preferred to make them a bit fatter. No, that the boosters were the size they needed to be. But they had to be shipped by train, and so from the factory to the launch site there were tunnels, and therefore they had to make the SRBs smaller. No, that's not true. As we'll find out when I tell the actual story, 2 things. Firstly, the boosters had to be the size they needed to be to do the boosting. If they weren't the right size, the shuttle wouldn't have taken off. Secondly, as they did when they moved the booster segments around, they just went a different way. You can just do that, folks. You can just go a different way. We have the technology.
There's not the one holy corridor.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, it turns out there was, but it's just it looked a bit silly on the map because it was dodging slightly smaller structures, right?
Okay. Oh my god, I desperately want to see one of those, like, whenever a truck goes under a slightly too low tunnel and
it peels
carves
the
a chunk off the top. Yeah, just doing that with an SRB in some random town in Utah.
Oh dear, yeah.
World's 3rd largest non-nuclear explosion.
And the last annoying thing is that this guy had said that Roman chariots are the size they are because that's the size of 2 horse arses, which is like, no, horses have different arses sizes. So firstly,
standardized Roman horse asses.
The standardized Roman horse ass. But secondly, as we know, there is no connection. There's another disconnect, which is there was no Imperial Roman chariots, so there's no connection between Roman chariots and track gauge. So that's another. And then now we know there's no connection between track gauge and loading gauge. So this story is complete bunkum. You'll be glad to know it's also over. The reason why I bring that story up, though, it's very stupid, but it does give us a chance to talk about how railways were involved in the design and the life of the shuttle program, and then therefore how that ties into Artemis as we saw go shooting up towards the moon marvelously. Which is interesting. So no more false horns. Possibly I will accidentally press the Gamer Horns button again with my fat fingers. But firstly, I just want to give a big shout out to a friend of mine, John Morgan Christoph, in the US, who joined me on my podcast way back in 2021 to kind of talk about this subject in like a lot more detail. He and kind of in turn, I referenced a few sources, but in true Quinn style, I'm going to put some sources in up front, if that's all right, which is basically the 2 main ones are T.A. Heppenheimer's The Space Shuttle Decision, NASA's search for a reusable space vehicle, and his book, The Space Shuttle Development Program. They're both really good on the detail of this. There's also a really nice little like NASA sort of random PDF that's in amongst their, if you just Google stuff, NASA has an enormous database and it comes up. They have a really nice little summary of the NASA Railroad, which is quite nice as well. So
cool.
Those are my sources that kind of go into this. So despite the fact that included much train chat, really this whole discussion kind of ties into the history of the world's most powerful solid rocket booster and their replacement, the world's most powerful solid rocket booster, because these two are they're the same thing. Yeah, they're the same thing. So yeah, the shuttle boosters and then the SLS boosters. The SLS boosters are kind of like, we just make it longer and maybe a bit more powerful with some like slightly newer tech. And yeah, it's the same booster,
things have changed in 25-ish years.
Yeah, like exactly. I guess guess they managed to get a bit more horsepower out of the thing by just mild advances in tech around and that nozzle design and stuff like that.
Nothing revolutionary, just kind of things improve.
It very much, they've taken the parachutes out the top and largely it's the same piece of kit, but we'll get to that. So I know that everyone listening to this you're all massive fans of solid fuel boosters, right? Massive fans of solid fuel boosters.
I actually have a soft spot for them.
Yeah, I remember that there was a great episode way ages ago where you had like some fantastic Q&As with someone who actually builds the things, which is really cool. They are a candle with like a metal, like an upside down candle with inside a tin, right? That's a solid fuel
Chris,
booster.
you love aluminum.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when it's burning.
So we need some quick facts about solid boosters to just frame this chat, right? Coming from a trains guy. But so the first is like the primary use case of a solid fuel booster, right, is they're typically used for ballistic missiles because they can sit in place for ages. You don't have to refuel them. You can just make them, sit them for ages, and they're basically fine, right? That's a key part of their use case. The performance of these things, like they have extremely high thrust to weight ratios, right? So it makes them extremely useful for like the first kick. We've all played Kerbal Space Program, right? They might not have great ISP, but they give you a hell of a good kick, right? Which is useful for getting shit off the ground that's too heavy because you were too lazy to design it properly to start with.
Just add more fuel, just add more thrust, just add more fuel, just add more
boosters. Add boosters, and then do the weird thing where you like make like star-shaped boosters when you look from above.
Boosters hooked to boosters, hooked to boosters.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fine.
We've all done it. So that makes them very useful, as you say, for lifting existing badly designed or lazily designed liquid propellant launch vehicles. I'm teasing, of course. Just they're good for lifting conventional liquid fueled vehicles off the launch pad, or perhaps a vehicle that has a particularly heavy payload that it doesn't normally. You can sellotape some extra boosters, as is the case for like the
Centaur,
the Titans, for example. Like the Titans did that. Like they were like, this works fine for the small aluminium tin that we send a chimp/human up in, but as soon as we start attaching heavy military satellites, we need to put solid boosters on it.
I was going to say that's kind of the theory with the Vulcan Centaur as well. You can have anywhere from no to 6.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I guess it does give you that kind of incremental. You can't really do that with liquid booster. I guess you could like not fill them as much, but still, yeah.
So the thing is about those that the result of the thrust to weight ratio is because of very dense propellant. That means that those boosters are extremely heavy and they cannot be easily transported in the same way that liquid boosters can be. A liquid booster without fuel in it can be very lightweight, sometimes so lightweight that they barely hold themselves structurally intact, right?
Sometimes they implode, which means you can transport them very, very much easily, in some cases in a plane, right? You cannot transport big solid rocket boosters in a plane. It's not possible. So that's like kind of key theme, right? So what about trains? What about specifically the NASA Railroad? Because this is a really important player in our story. And we have to start by talking about Space Force. No, don't worry. We don't have to talk about Space Force. We can talk about where Space Force would actually be at Cape Canaveral, right? So Cape Canaveral, and again, you this is your stuff. Shout at me when I get stuff wrong. But since I think like it was like late 40s is when the Department of Defense had people in Cape Canaveral, right? They were kind of doing stuff there. They had a missile firing laboratory that then transferred in like 10 years, like basically that was 1949, 1959, that transferred to NASA to become the launch operations director, I believe. Yes, I'm not certain of the exact dates and the exact times, but yes, at that time, you had like the Army, Navy, Air Force, all kind of at different pads at Cape Canaveral, all competing to be, the one to race Sputnik or whatever. Yeah, and just effectively running separate competing space programs to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Let us hold. And what do we all think of the livery for the NASA switcher train?
Oh, we will get there because I literally have a line in the notes saying an honorable mention to, because Christ is lovely. So yes, absolutely. So that was 1959. That's like sort of right stuff era, fun stuff.
Yes.
You guys covered this. You covered the succession of explosions that resulted in the US being beaten into space, which is a good, fairly recent episode.
Yeah.
So John F. Kennedy, remember that guy? One of the various shot Kennedys, of course, gave the goal of a crewed lunar landing by 1970, right? Everyone knows the bloody thing. So that required a massive expansion of launch operations, and fairly quickly it became became obvious that it would require a ridiculous launch vehicle, which just physically couldn't be supported on the geology of Cape Canaveral, at least without rebuilding it to the point of putting it out of use for the military, which that's bad. Don't put stuff out of use for the military, they get upset. So you basically ended up with suddenly you needed to build a huge new complex, and that required a railway. And so in 1963, only 2 years after JFK gave one of his various famous speeches, the Florida East Coast Railway constructed about 12 kilometers of new railway from its main line, the one that Brightline bulldozed people on level crossings on now, into the Kennedy, what would become the Kennedy Space Center, just north of Titusville. It connected to a whole bunch of extra NASA constructed railroads, so about 28 miles. Sorry, that was 7. I'll not do kilometers again. I'm sorry, slap wrist. I should say it's the. That's honest, right. I won't use metric again.
You can. I think we normally do somewhat.
I know you do. I know you actually do, which I'm very grateful for.
At least to my Canadian standard
against metric.
50-50.
Yeah, this is it. Freedom units puzzle me. So, so I say they do that, but also I use miles day to day because Britain just desperately tries to have it both ways. So so you've ended up with about 36 miles of railroad that comes off the Florida East Coast main line. And it's just a huge complex of railroads that were built to basically massively expand the Space Center. The Kennedy Space Center was built by railroads. Huge amounts of stuff was built in. First 5 years of operation, the railroad was delivering thousands and thousands of wagon loads of aggregate that was used to build up the Corolev on its own. Wow. Everyone knows the Corolev, the big slow motion thing where everyone has serious conversations in historical adaptations of anything to do with Apollo. The Corolev was an enormous volume of aggregate to let the big crawler move along. That in and of itself was just 30,000 carloads of stuff. That's before we talk about the concrete, the cement, the steel brought in to build, the various pads. Well, it's 39A and 39B. Just so much big civil engineering happening, while all the stuff that you watch in various adaptations of how do we make Apollo work? Well, that's fine. But first of all, you need to build an enormous complex on the ground, right? Which was epic. So that was the railroad, right? There was a huge, it was even, during the Apollo program, the railroad was transporting 56 carloads of propellant per launch to get a Saturn V into up into and out of the atmosphere. And it was even ferrying Apollo astronauts around the place for occasion basically took them to, actually what's funny, the trains didn't just take astronauts to the lunar testing space where they basically built a moon, but they actually took the stuff that they built the moon out of, which I think is quite fun.
They brought in the regolith simulator.
Yeah, they bought a bunch of basalt rock and sand to build the thing that they called the sand pile, which is kind of fun, right?
I hope they had a covered walkway for the astronauts so that they could pretend the whole time. I hope they covered the windows so that the astronauts could leave their bedrooms, they could hop on the train, they could get, and there's it's the moon, yay!
I'm on the moon! Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's fun. It's fun that they not only did the NASA Railroad build the ability to get to the moon, but they also built the moon, which is kind of fun. But then, as we know, boohoo, Apollo finished, all that fun stopped, and NASA was trying to work out what next. What's going to happen next?
What are we going to do with these trains?
Yeah, this is a period of enormous transition. And actually the NASA Railroad, other than moving propellant and also a load of redacted stuff that it had been doing, because the military stuff is south of KSC, those trains would have to go through KSC, taking their redacteds down to what is now the Space Force base, what was Cape Canaveral. So lots of propellant as well, lots of stuff to fill up various Titan rockets and so on, to send probably normal stuff up into space.
I love that sentence, carrying their redacteds.
Yeah. Well,
it gets the point across perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ask about that. So we have this enormous shifting of objectives, right? There's this enormous transition, this enormous shifting of objectives. The Apollo program winds down. The US government kind of opts against establishing the permanent lunar base or pursuing human Mars missions.
Right.
History rhymes, etc. Instead, they decided, no, we're gonna build a reusable vehicle to reduce the cost of space travel and enable more frequent future missions. This is a good idea. It is a good idea. It would have been nice to do both, of course. We're all space heads. It would be nice to have done both. But I think probably actually at the time, it made sense for them to go, you know what, we should just make space more accessible. It's a good way it's a different challenge. We should do that.
Yeah.
And this thing becomes the space shuttle, including, of course, the iconic orbiter, right? We love the space shuttle, probably. I do actually love the space shuttle. It's very stupid and very complicated, but I do love it. I think it's brilliant. It looks great. It's iconic.
I think it was Alexander the OK has a very good video on this of like, it was worth doing for the technology, among other things, just to like keep America in space, just because if they didn't do the shuttle, it's not like there was another rival project they would have picked.
Yeah, there's no thing, there's no particular space purpose. Okay, you had Skylab and all the fun that was, but
yeah, Skylab without Saturn V, like all of Skylab, all of Apollo applications was just trying to keep using old Apollo stuff from when it was recycling. It's SLS again.
And as we'll get to, that didn't necessarily stop as the shuttle program continued. We'll get to that momentarily. But yeah, like, so I've no doubt at some point you'll go into like tremendous detail in the development of the space shuttle. Like it's a big thing, but like even just the orbiter itself is like, it's beautiful FTL fodder because it was by no means a perfect and sensible process. Oh boy, I've just got in my notes I've written, you'll do this in a future episode because : oh boy in caps, because oh no, so,
oh god, oh fuck.
Yeah, so the back and forth over the broad development of what the shuttle should look like was between NASA and the Federal Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, and it's of particular interest to our story because basically the back and forth it was a ping pong of decisions that shaped the shuttle as we know it today. It was kind of alongside all the requirements for like the frequency of launch and other military requirements. This would very much make the shuttle, in all its technical wonder, a Lunkengrave overcomplex brute, right? And the first decision was like on the arrangement and usability of the Hellocat and of the
Paisley,
launch.
Fuck off.
I was about to ask, what's the Hellocat?
Yeah, the Hellocat is in the notes. I prepared for this moment. So the decisions were basically, what is the launch platform going to be? And there were three broad outlines, which, like, there's a nice diagram you can get up that really nicely explains these. And these three diagrams. The first was a two-stage reusable winged vehicles. Reusable winged vehicle 1 that would go up to get reusable winged vehicle 2 up into the upper atmosphere. Then it would go off and go into orbit, and reusable winged vehicle 1 would then come back down and land, which is kind of a little bit like Virgin Galactic vibes, but just bigger and insane.
I think there were also I can't remember the exact name of it, but there was a Soviet attempt to do something similar. Like launching rockets off of planes, off of either the back or under the wings, has been a thing and attempted.
Exactly, and this one was, the logic of this was that it was a vertical launch. So it was vertical launch, but the idea was that the winged vehicle would, the first big weird winged vehicle would presumably a really bizarre blunt nose. Exactly, Chris. Yeah.
Kind of like a winged booster, more so than a plane. Okay, cool.
Kind of a cute idea. In a way, it probably has echoes a bit of actually what SpaceX were doing with the, with its super heavy lift thing, which is, like, it's kind of that one doesn't have wings, but it does come, it's the first big stage and it's reusable, comes back down. So you can see echoes there. The second was, here comes Saturn V again, was the reusable orbiter, basically what we know as the orbiter, but basically sellotaped to the top of a Saturn V booster, which would have been fun, I guess. Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. And then the third option is the one that we're familiar with today, which is the orbiter with a big fuel tank, its own big engines, which is funny that those engines being specified then are the ones that were literally attached to Artemis 2. Well, three of them were literal shuttle engines, with the fourth being like a one they had in the warehouse for Artemis 2, which is cool and weird.
Don't worry, we got one on consignment, just whack it on.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always found it kind of weird that they went with the option of putting the engines on the shuttle and with the external fuel tank, but I guess that is like the logic of, Energia, Buran would not have recovered its engines, and the shuttle does
they are
get to
big,
reuse its engines.
expensive, complicated, so it makes some sense. Although agreed, it is like, well, you just put the very annoyingly heavy thing that makes your like Kerbal Space Program center of mass thing really annoying.
Yeah.
At the same time, thinking of whipping 3, engines worth of turbo pumps into the ocean.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But it then makes me sad that we're now letting them just get burned up or actually not burned up. They're not getting burned up. They're just getting flattened into fucking tin can on impact with the ocean, right? Which is kind of sad for these 40-year legacy engines.
Exactly what I said. Just watching RS-25s get turned into pancakes.
So some 80-year-old whale is getting PTSD off the coast of Florida right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Just what time of the year is it? Oh God, oh fuck. Get out of here.
This final setup was bloody heavy, therefore it needed 2 boosters on either side. It needed these high thrust to weight ratio boosters flanking the orbiter. This was called TAOS, thrust assisted orbital shuttle. That's what we ended up getting. That's kind of a bit of a the rest is history type situation. So the latter one was chosen essentially because it was cheaper to develop in capital costs, despite the fact that it would have massively increased operational costs. Now, you might think that's very stupid. That's a very British way to do things, frankly. But there is some logic to it. Like, finances were kind of a bit tight in the US at the time because of something that you'd been doing in East Asia for a while, among other things.
It killed one space program, and goddamn it, it'll kill another.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they did with the trains. Canceled Apollo, sent the trains to Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, to get this program moving, it needed to be cheap up front, and it was less important if it was super expensive later on. I would argue that it's like, yeah, but you have a sovereign currency, just borrow some more money, US, fine. But anyway, whatever.
Fire up the printer, stop bitching.
Iran hadn't fucked with your bag even the first time yet at this point. Like, you could have just afforded... Anyway, right, okay, that's another
Admittedly,
story.
we fucked with our own bag there in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't wait for Canada to have its own, like, Suez crisis tier thing so that I can relate. Because, I mean, didn't Canada solve the Suez crisis? I think that's where we got our, like, our whole dream of, like, we're the peacekeeping country that died in 2000.
If the US is capable of anything, it's terminal bag fuckery. But... Yay!
My turn.
God's irony.
There it is. Oh,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I don't have a nice spoken one. The only spoken one I've got is of Liam of WTYP saying
Pennsylvania dominance.
That's all I've got. So
Awesome.
Yeah, anyway.
Does Pennsylvania factor into this story?
It doesn't at all. No.
You could have just said yes.
Yeah, I should have said yes. You're right.
Damn it.
No, this is a Utah-oriented story, isn't it? So right. So then we've gone. They made the decision. Right, we're doing Teos. We need boosters. Then the decision is right. What kind of booster should they be? Should they be solid versus liquid? Fairly quickly, solid was chosen because it's cheaper. Like it's cheaper. And then the final decision was, okay, who is going to build these solid fuel boosters? Nothing like this had ever been built before. The scale of these boosters was off the chart. These were absolutely enormous. And there were 2 options, really. You have the aeronautics industry or the chemical industry. So, right, the aeronautics industry had been building big solid fuel boosters. There was the Aerojet 260-inch booster, which was literally called the 260-inch booster because they didn't come up with a better name.
It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, like the thing is, the aeronautics industry knew that they had to have production in useful places because they make big stuff that's delicate. Therefore, it needs to be transported often by barge, right? Water, so long as you're inland, water's quite a good way to transport kind of delicate stuff and heavy stuff by sea. The chemistry industry, meanwhile, was great for building explosives. And the solid fuel boosters are kind of just an explosive coming out the bottom end of a can.
Yeah.
And so, but their plants are all inland and miles from anywhere useful so that they don't vaporize humans much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes good sense. And so that's Thiokol and Hercules, right, who were both located in Utah in the desert. So if they won the contract, they'd need to split up the solid rocket motors into bits and then transport them by train. Enter trains again. Okay, so fine. So that decision was made. The decision was like, we're going to let the boom people, not the fly stuff people, make these enormous solid fuel boosters because we frankly, they made the decision, NASA made the decision, we need reliability in scale here rather than like it being a perfect flying machine. These things are just dumb and they need to explode the way we want them to.
Right.
Which obviously, as anyone who knows anything about Challenger, they didn't do that, but that's another story. Oops.
The problem with Challenger is the hate came out of the wrong area.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. Like explosion came out of the wrong bit at that point. Yes, that's true.
You have to gently convince the explosion to go only one way. As soon as it starts going 2 ways, then you have
to politely coax the explosion to come out the bottom.
Yeah, you don't want to have too much explosion all at once.
Yeah, it sounded a bit like I was talking about IBS there, but that's another story, isn't it? So once all those decisions were made, NASA knew what they needed to do, and that meant that they had to make their railroad do stuff again. So the NASA railroad was put back into work again in a big way. It had to build out the capability in Florida to accept the delivery of these booster segments from Utah. It had to create an enormous runway, a huge landing facility for the orbiter, like a reservoir. Basically, I believe, but all 3 of you, correct me if I'm wrong, the runway runway at KSC was basically one of the abort modes, right? So like in one of the abort modes, it would like basically spin back around and like before it actually entered orbital velocity, it would basically do a UE
like
and
a
come
return.
back down in
Yes.
KSC. Is that right? I think that's why you'd have the runway there.
I believe so. Honestly, any shuttle abort mode is kind of cursed beyond belief, and kind of more of just we're going to tell the crew that this is something that could maybe work.
Yes. I mean, they could have just pretended, because good God, the volume of material they brought in to build that runway. It's still one of the longest low altitude runways in the world. It's a lot of gravel and concrete. Although admittedly, like doing a handbrake turn at max Q in just an orbiter, I guess that doesn't go so well.
I mean, I guess like once you're further on, then you can be like, the higher up you get, the thinner the atmosphere, the more likely survival in a disconnect is. But then you're also flying significantly higher, further, and faster. At that point, you're looking at like, do we have an emergency landing site in South Africa?
Yeah, or I think Machrihanish in Scotland actually was one of the shuttle abort landing locations. People shout at me if I'm wrong on that one, but Machrihanish is I think the UK's longest runway, possibly for that reason. It's very stupidly long, and so possibly for that reason. Like, nerds out there, go correct me on that one. So I suppose also it could just be that it's an orbital return runway. They just wanted another one, and it was a good place to put it. I don't know. Anyway, irrelevant. It was built by trains.
I mean, they had emergency, like, I believe that would be the one that they built, but they also just designated. They went to a bunch of airports and just said, like, hey, 99.999% it won't happen. Can we land a shuttle here if we need to? And you will get no warning.
Yeah. There'll be no warning. And then, well, actually, like I'm jumping ahead of it, but there was one time later on in the history of the shuttle program where there was an abort or there was some issue that meant they couldn't land at Edwards as they normally did. So they landed at another airbase that resulted in them sending a huge number of, it was not, they were supposed to land at Edwards. They landed at White Sands. And as a result of that, they had to send all of their turn the orbiter around kit from Edwards, and they did that by train. So there's another train connection. Anyway, I digress.
I found the UK site. It's RAF Fairford.
Oh, it was Fairford.
Cool.
Interesting. That's strange, but also understandable. I mean, also it's yours. It's the US's. So yeah, that makes some sense. Because of course that's where all the Iran blowing up stuff has been launching from. Because we're not involved in that. Anyway, I digress. So,
except for that guy with the axe.
Yeah, except for the guy with the axe. Yeah. We don't ask too many questions about that guy. So, it wasn't just all the civil engineering again, because suddenly the railroad it became much more involved in every single launch. It wasn't just bringing propellant. All of a sudden, there needed to be new cars to handle more cryogenic propellant. There needed to be cars to just carry helium as a pressurant, which is like, obviously we have propellants, but also you need pressurants, which is just a thing that is stopping the booster or stopping the tank from kind of imploding on itself, right?
Yeah, you don't exactly want to show up with your cargo staved in.
Yes, quite. So there were a bunch of these. Oh, I didn't do the honorable mention. There was the honorable mention, of course, to the glorious American locomotive company S2 switchers, which I got excited about and then forgot to tell everyone about, which is, these stunning ex-US Army S2 switchers that have this gorgeous NASA livery. It's very, very nice. Chris, you were right to get excited about it.
We'll make sure to have a picture linked in the description, because those things look awesome.
The striping is nice. The tasteful red, beautiful.
They do look really good. Well, RIP to them, because they got swapped out. The S2s got swapped out with some SW1500s in a kind of still nice, but not quite as nice, like red, white, and black livery. That's kind of a bit more the newer corporate identity of NASA at the time. A whole bunch of new flatbed cars.
No good livery can just remain in service.
No, they have to get rid of them, and then they bring the. I think there's like a short line somewhere that's got one of those switchers, and they've got the NASA livery, but they've swapped, because for whatever reason they've swapped NASA with the short lines letters, but you can't tell unless you close up. It's kind of fun. It's cute.
Okay.
So there's just a huge amount of stuff, not least a whole bunch of new flat cars with massive covers for these motor segments. Like the rocket boosters need to be segmented because of their size. They had covers that needed to be hoisted on and off, and those also had to have aircon to keep the booster segments cool and fresh, which is nice. But the thing with the railroad is that made things quite cheap. Space shuttle program, not cheap, but the railroad was a lot cheaper than using cargo aircraft or barge. The railroad was cheaper because it was quicker than a barge, and cheaper than flying the thing. So that was kind of a major advantage. And they did a lot of like buying cars and refitting them rather than building stuff from scratch. So there's lots of like nice, cheap stuff there.
Yeah, using some like off-the-shelf hardware.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to very briefly talk about the actual boosters themselves. And this actually goes for the current boosters on the Artemis, on the SLS, as just with an extra segment attached, basically. So you've got lots of bits of a solid rocket booster, and you can Google diagrams that show you all this stuff. So the front end is the nose cap. You've got like a kind of a nice angled shroud that goes underneath that. You've got kind of a forward section that's got loads of like avionics and bullshit in it. But you've got 3 basically identical solid propellant like can filled with candle, and then you've got the aft solid propellant segment that also has the nozzle and the motor attached to it. It's got the actual explosion goes out of here part attached to it, and then the last bit is like an aft skirt that extends the nozzle to give you the appropriate kind of thrust and so on. So you've got 4 segments that need to be refilled by the explosives people in Utah, and those 4 segments are the ones that get fished out of the ocean, put on a train, and sent to Utah as part of this new sort of factory train approach to delivering the shuttle, the bits that it needs to go into space, right?
So like we've fully closed the loop now of like manufacturing, sending out, recovering, returning, refurbishing, and so on and so
Sending
forth.
back.
Exactly. And there's a whole, there's a whole logistics chain of you needed a fleet, there were 2 boats that had to go out and collect these things. They basically dragged them intact from having landed there. They also, weirdly, one of the things I find weird is that they float vertically upwards. You kind of imagine they'd kind of float on their side, but because of the mass of the nozzle and the fact you've just got a big thing full of air that's only got one way for water to go in, the thing basically floated quite neatly vertically upwards.
Yeah,
cool.
I just found a picture of it. This is...
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Like weird.
And apparently on one of them, they came, or overnight, they just got close to each other. So you just have that beautiful picture.
Just vaguely floated near it.
Yeah, just the 2 of them kind of floating next to you. That is
rules.
odd. Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? And also convenient, because I bet it makes it a lot easier to... Oh, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it makes it harder. But anyway, they connect it up and then they basically drag them along with a tugboat, these kind of glorified tugboats. They custom built a dock at KSC that the tugboat pushes the booster, which is enormous, by the way, pushes the booster up into kind of a rig that then lifts it up onto shore. It would then get lifted up onto a flatbed to then get disassembled. Oh, anyway, right. So the issue with these segments is, well, there's lots of issues with the segments. Like, okay, so all the other bits would stay at KSC, like the avionics bits, all that stuff would just get kind of processed at KSC. But those 4, the 3 fuel segments and then the fuel and nozzle segment would need to get shipped back to Utah. The issue arose that those segments were so heavy that carrying them back to back would have actually overloaded and potentially collapsed several of the rail bridges between Florida and Utah, meaning that the cars had to be kind of distributed along a longer train with a bunch of like little splitter wagons between them, which is kind of fun.
Oh, okay.
So
just for the sake of spreading out the mass, like just so
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you can imagine that these, trains are kind of a distributed load in a way, because you've got lots of wheels, so they end up putting a distributed load on. So if you spread the heavy stuff out with light wagons, you kind of reduce the distributed load for the lovely engineers out there with their like arrows diagram on the bridge. Yeah, lovely. So that makes that straight. So if you ever see pictures of these things, they're not like all in a row. You'll see that there's like big funny shaped wagon, then a bunch of like regular cars, then another big funny shaped wagon. They kind of spread out, so that's fine.
Yeah, just a box booster, and just so on and so forth.
Exactly.
I think we're going to have fun with that, because when we get to my section, every single Soyuz on a train is just like the engine, the rocket, and then another engine. And it's like the tiniest, shortest little train.
Okay, it's time to have the stupid kid laugh. Do not hump on these.
They did actually bin a bridge one time. Whoops. They managed to partially collapse a trestle bridge, thankfully without damaging any of the booster segments. So whoops.
Just leaving a trail of broken bridges behind us. Just like, nobody worry, the boosters are fine.
Yeah,
the boosters
exactly.
have not been damaged.
It's a rare situation where the class 1s got told to go fuck themselves rather than the class 1s telling the entirety of the US to go fuck itself. So that's nice.
I just like to think, instead of, taking responsibility, NASA just turned around and said, why'd you build your bridges so shitty?
Well, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So there was one last hitch, which was that the railroad link in the Thiokol, which it was at the time, Thiokol plant, down to the main line at Corinne, Utah, Utah had been bypassed in 1904 with like a new, much straighter line using a trestle across Great Salt Lake. Subsequently, the original tracks over Promontory Summit, which, by the way, is where the first transatlantic railroad was completed in 1869. Little rail nerd fact. That's where the famous Golden Spike was driven. Anyway, those tracks were lifted in 1942 as part of the war effort to kind of take those tracks to repair elsewhere, which meant that the Union Pacific trains would have to drop the segment cars at another new yard built down at Corinne, and those segments would be lifted onto massive low-loader trucks to drive up the route of the forward railroad on a highway to the Thiokol factory. This is such a jerry-rigged, bizarre, this is like trains, planes, and automobiles, but for the boosters.
Thanks, I hate it.
And just to get that final last little leg, I was going to say though, it's funny the way the story went, but in my head I was building up like, oh my god, they're like Promontory Mount or whatever you said it was called, and I was like what kind of Polar Express up a mountain, down a mountain bullshit are these boosters gonna do?
Yeah, and like like the U.S. national anthem swells right as like they relayed the
right
tracks
to the
for
peak,
these
and then it just goes flying down the mountain right into the Thiokol plant.
But no, sadly they just decided to fix this the only way that the US can, which is put it on a truck.
Hell yeah.
Put it on a Mack truck, hell yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
That, it's an F-150, F-350 actually.
So one of the things that typified like the military-industrial complex, as well as like the space military-industrial complex about this time when this was all being developed, was like post-Apollo, massive reorganizations, massive like corporate changes, gobbling up this, that, and the other. Funnily enough, this was also happening on the railroads because it was at the same time that there was the absolutely colossal Penn Central bankruptcy, the biggest corporate bankruptcy in history. Loads of corporate changes to the aerospace industry, and towards the end of the Vietnam War not helping as well. So mergers galore, and so that made all of this that bit more messy as they were like deciding whose responsibility were lots of these moves and decisions to kind of stuff. So it's worth very briefly. I've said so much already, but hopefully it's all train relevant and hopefully space relevant and interesting. Yeah, there were like loads of specific little fiddly changes at KSC to manage the lifting of these bizarre segmented booster bits on and off the flat wagons. So there's a new building called the RPSF, or the Rotation Processing and Surge Facility. Fuck knows what the surge bit means.
I love acronyms so fucking much.
So the RPSF, which is kind of fairly close to the VAB, the famous one, the tall vertical assembly building, which is kind of largely to avoid storing those like potentially explosive solid rocket fuel boosters in the VAB for extended periods before they put the whole lot together, right? So there's a separate building next to the VAB.
Florida, lightning, lots of it.
Yeah. So it's a good example here of like the swapping of development funding for operational funding, because this meant like an enormously complex process of disassembly, assembly, integration, assurance for like 2.5 minutes of burn time. Like the number of bolts between each segment that had to be very carefully tested, undone, redone, the jig to turn it from horizontal to vertical and back again, just so much complexity and mechanical faff, just incredible. Yeah. Which kind of and that's kind of before we talk about we briefly touched on the marine infrastructure and the fleet that they required, like all the like cranes and clamshell cover attachment facilities and stuff, which kind of then brings us to the last point, which is like coming back to the stupid viral thread at the start, which is the idea that loading gauge, the space around the track that trains can fit through, had any impact on the design of the boosters. Those clamshell wagons are huge, and the train passes through several tunnels that are massive. They're large enough to fit them without any headache whatsoever. Indeed, there was actually like an update to the boosters design that got cancelled in the early 90s called the Advanced Solid Rocket Motor Program, that kind of proposed a design that was 4 inches wider and would still have been moved by rail using much the same route, right? Okay. So it just wasn't the idea that loading gauge had any factor. Yeah, exactly. The idea that loading gauge had any factor, none. It's just a bullshit story, right?
Gotcha.
Now, the last little bit about logistics is that there was also a connection from the Southern Pacific's main line to Vandenberg, which was going to launch shuttles for a bit. They were going to use that for polar launches. You use KSC for equatorial-ish launches, right? But if you want like military satellites, they want to go around the whole planet, which means they need to be polar orbits. Yeah. Everyone's done missions in KSP. You all know what polar orbit. You launch your scanning satellite to maximize your science with polar.
It tracks the entire Earth. Yeah.
Exactly. So just before the Challenger disaster made the military go, we don't want to send up our expensive spy satellites that way anymore.
Before Enron got got their, pants
Yeah,
wet.
exactly. What's fun at Vandenberg is that the plan for the shuttle was that rather than the crawler moving the shuttle out fully built, at Vandenberg, the buildings, the actual VAB splits apart and moves out of the way. So that it would have assembled the shuttle and like moved away fully Thunderbird style before the shuttle launched,
Honestly,
which is very
that
cool.
does make more sense.
I think Ariane has something like that as well, where like it gets assembled on the launch pad and then the VAB rolls back from it.
Why move the thing that is the most expensive there?
Yeah, well, yeah. Crucially, those buildings are on tracks. They're on an extremely wide gauge railway to move them back and forth.
Technically, train.
There is one problem, though, which is that wouldn't have ever fucking worked because the volume of water required to make that work. Anyway, you all know what the west coast of the US is like. That volume of water simply didn't exist. So I don't think they'd have ever actually got it to work. They'd have had to like build several new reservoirs that they'd have had to like fill every time they needed to do a launch. It was just a mess.
Right.
Yeah.
So for military industrial complex reasons, the demise of the shuttle program meant that those boosters obviously got wrapped into like the Constellation program, then into like the Artemis program's kind of hardware suite, alongside the core stage, which had shuttle tech. As Chris pointed out, those beautiful RS-25s, all of that meant that like we dragged the railway's influence on the US space program right the way up to that Artemis 2 launch that we all just enjoyed, except in a stupid way, because all that infrastructure is just now used to get the boosters down to Florida, but they're expendable now, so they just crash into the sea in bits and that's it, which is sad. What's interesting is that a lot of those segments have already been back and forth on that railroad several times because there were 270 boosters or segments. I can't remember exactly what that number is, but all of those went up and back and now are being eaten up by the Artemis program.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, a bit sad. But yeah, much of that railroad infrastructure to kind of do the spinning of the boosters through that reuse cycle has been basically abandoned and sold off. RIP. But railroad still moving those booster segments from their final sort of refurbishment and filling of the explosion juice or the explosion putty down to Florida. So that concludes our way that the railroads have pretty severely influenced certainly the crude space flight kind of legacy in the US, which is kind of fun, right? And I'm sure it's as stupid and chaotic in Russia, right?
And also, I thank you for dispelling the whole two horses ass thing. Just
can we say for certain though that the Roman standard horse was not as wide as an SRB? Do we have, can we definitively say that they were not the size of an elephant?
That's a very, very good point. We can't. Yeah, if any of the real nerds are out there, I'm going to do a mid-reel plug, which is you can get the full breakdown of that, how that thing is horseshit. I wrote a piece that goes into why the railroad side is horseshit, but also there's a rail natter on it way back from 5 years ago.
Listener, you will find a link down below.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Quinn. Yeah, marvelous.
Something that anyone who looks at the description before they get to the halfway point of this episode is going to be incredibly confused. Horse ass here, click.
So one, I don't think that using a horse's ass, especially Roman horses, is a good gauge of anything because, the Romans weren't really well known for their horses or their equestrianism, right?
No, they weren't really. Their whole shtick was stomping about, right?
Yeah, their whole shtick was stomping about. They were not particularly well known for their horsemanship. And then two, I'm really chuffed that all of this episode basically stemmed from the concept of why would somebody go onto the internet and just tell lies?
Well, that's like some of the OG FTL episodes we're doing. I mean, you still do plenty of those, but some of the OGs were specifically picking up on the internet bullshit that people say about stuff.
And then any story, it inevitably, that's the best part of those little stories. There might be, whether it's completely lies or there's just a tiny little bit of truth in there, you inevitably find something more fun and probably stupider.
Can you imagine if the lost astronaut conspiracies had kind of grown up with an internet to fuel them? That would have been, yeah. Ooh, boy.
Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
The Soyuz rocket factory.
Yeah, so for my section, I had initially prepared something trying to prepare as close to what Gareth just told you about as possible. However, the Soviet Union is very limited in the amount of English language sources I can find on the exact operation of like how the boosters got from place to place, even in terms of like memoirs of Boris Chertok, Mission, those kinds of guys. It pretty much all just boils down to the boosters were transported by rail. I'll throw this right at the front, just because I thought it was fun, of a fuck up on, I believe, the first R7 ever delivered by rail from the factory to Baikonur. Quote, "But while it was outside the assembly building, a collision occurred between a locomotive and a railway car. The next day, the damage was evaluated. The chassis to which one of the lateral blocks of the rocket was attached had been torn off of its bindings. A special commission was formed to make a series of specific checks of this block. The driver of the locomotive was severely punished. That was the end result. They used the booster as is."
Wow, they took him out back and shot him.
You know, like,
yeah, that guy's. Oh dear. I'm not sure that guy was around after that anymore.
I think the phrase is he is dead as fuck.
Yep. He's working at Baikonur now.
He's working at Baikonur, a fate worse than death.
Is that like we sent him to the farm? We sent him to
We put him in the scorpion fight.
Yeah. Oh god, it's an interesting thing. Like very briefly before, like I'm already interjecting. You've not even started. I'm so sorry. But in terms of railroad stuff, it's worth reminding everyone that in the US, when this sort of logistics for Apollo was being thought out, US railroads were still a massive part of any logistics in the US in a way that they absolutely are not anymore.
They haven't atrophied to hell yet.
Yeah, like and kind of an equal of like Russia decided fairly quickly post-war to do a lot of big railroad construction. Railroads had always been a big part of long distance travel in Russia.
Also a source of paranoia evidenced by their gauges.
Yeah, well, yeah, like Russian railways were and still are, you know, despite everything, pretty dominant in what they do for a variety of reasons. So yeah, so like both countries, railroads made sense to be part of that logistics chain, right? It's just that, as I believe you might tell us, Quinn, the Soviets amped it up, right?
Yes. And specifically because I don't have all of those details, I decided instead, I was trying to get as much of the details down and present as much of a kind of like pure empirical story as possible. Sure. And then I kept reading, and then I did the thing that, Gareth, you mentioned earlier of, I hit a history point and I found a couple of guys and it immediately just forced everything. This, okay, without spoiling anything, because we will get there, I am incredibly excited for this because I think we have found the biggest impact. Nobody dies. However, almost 1 million people are made, like their lives and their jobs are made worse by Sergei Korolev by accident. An entire city goes into an economic meltdown because of the rocket pilling. Which, so, just consider that an amuse-bouche of where we are going to get to. Because
I'm so excited.
This is less the story of how Soviet rocket logistics worked and more the really dumb story of how Soviet rocket logistics got to be the way it was.
Why am I just imagining Korolev just both hands braced on either side of a cauldron of hydrazine, just staring into it, trying to define the truth of the universe,
mixing my witch's brew, but devil's venom, close, Oh, fuck. Now we need to get Korolev, Mission. No, probably not Mission. Definitely Glushko. Who would be the third witch? Maybe Chertok. No, Chelome. Fuck.
Chelome, yeah.
My OKB heads are getting mixed up.
This is the fun bit where listeners, I am a listener, like a proper FTL listener. Like I have listened to all of it up to this point. And the fun is that I've just done a load of yakking. You'll be glad to know you've got rid of me now. Now you're in an FTL episode. Quinn is about to unspool and I'm so excited. I always get so excited for this moment where Quinn's about to go.
Yeah, well, now you're back to being a listener, so I'd kind of appreciate it if you didn't talk, because we're kind of like back to the host now.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's true. Sorry.
and listener, if FTL is the top, what if we make this a trend of like, if FTL is the #1 show for you on Spotify during a year, you get to come on the next year. That's a make a wish.
Everyone gets to stay in the guest chair once.
Now, I am willing to bet that most listeners of this show have seen a picture of a Soyuz rocket being carried on a train. I personally love these. It's normally like I said, it's a teensy tiny cute little train that is completely dwarfed by a massive rocket lying on its side. It's got all these gantries and hoses running off of it. There's also some really cool shots I found where the tracks take this cool modern rocket past the abandoned hangars of past projects, like a fucked up Memento Mori.
It's like ontology.
It's great. I love. Yeah, you're just reminding
rocket,
it.
behave, otherwise this will be your fate too, cunt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Just slapping the rocket around. You better shape up before this becomes you.
And this is something that we will definitely be talking about in the future, like specifically diving into Baikonur, is how huge Baikonur was at its peak and how tiny it is now. There are 3 active launch pads at Baikonur, and one of them was like knocked out of action for 6 months and only came back online like 2 weeks ago. Baikonur at its peak had literal dozens of active launch pads all firing at the same time. It had like 7 different kinds of rocket.
Was that the boosters or the engine service like trolley that just kind of fell off its tracks?
Yes, that is the gantry. That is the engine service gantry that they forgot. It turns out like it slides back on rails. It's a train.
It's another train. Yep.
Did it not have end stops?
Fuck, that's something we could have talked about. We could have talked about that failure. It slides like before launch, it slides back into this cool little nook. Like it's got an alcove and it has a blast shield on one end to protect it. However, they are supposed to put a little pin in to like actually pin it in place. The pin is about a foot long, maybe like 4 inches across, and someone just forgot to do that. So when the rocket launched, like some of the thrust got into that nook and physically ripped the entire gantry out and dropped it into the flame trench. Yeah. There are great pictures you can find of this.
Yeah, it's like what they did. They basically did the equivalent of like drop the thing into a fire basket.
Yes.
Like chucked it in and just lit the thing on fire. I don't want this anymore. Smash. Chucks like petrol and then drops a lighter into it. Yeah, okay, good.
I was just had the mental image of number 1 before you corrected me on this, of just someone instead of, reversing out of a parking space, putting the car in the wrong gear and just sending it.
Oh, Jason boarding it off the top of a multi-story. Yeah, okay.
Now it's just I have a beer in one hand, firewood in the other. I throw my beer in the fire and try to just have a slug of wood.
So back in its heyday, a rocket could travel dozens of kilometers across busy tracks. Like there were actually reports of like traffic jams between different trains carrying different kinds of rockets to different launch pads. And it's like, it's a problem, sure, but they would just wait, let someone pass. This is a hustling and bustling like rocket site that is firing off. The Soviets had in the 70s and 80s, like they had like 3/4 of all launches every year. They were utterly dominant in space.
Also, Quinn, I think you posted a picture before, but this speaks to how probably reason for the dominance. Just how many boosters they have stacked and ready.
Oh, yeah. So I sent that picture to everybody. That is inside the factory that we are going to talk about. And actually, that picture that I sent is in 1995, and it represents them not doing work anymore because they were not. That is the leftovers from 1991 that have been sitting on the floor for 4 years.
That makes me sad.
That's why you can see in this entire thing, there are like 3 people and only 1 guy welding.
Yeah.
On the one hand, that would be awful, but on the other hand, I kind of feel like I would love that because I like doing my solitary work. I like putting a podcast in and just kind of like working on whatever I'm working on. If I just had 4 years and I was the only guy in the factory just told to like make a rocket, go.
I was going to say, I don't think we also need a dedicated rocket just watcher.
Yeah, you have 1 manager and 1 supervisor and 1 worker. Go.
You're just standing there sat above the factory floor on a lifeguard chair with an AK, making sure the rockets don't wake up.
So these rockets, they'd move from their assembly buildings to their launch sites on trains. Now, Baikonur is a ghost town. It only has 3 active pads. And the only pad that flies Soyuz's has its assembly building less than 1 kilometer away. It's just like right there. Practically, when it comes to the Soyuz rocket, Baikonur is a really tiny launch site. Everything else is either abandoned or unrelated to Soyuz operations. I believe it travels like 750 meters from assembly to launch. And they still have the whole big train operation for that.
The fact it's not towed by camel greatly insults me.
Yeah. This is traditionally how Soviet and Russian rockets have been assembled and prepped for launch, horizontally transported by train and raised up into their launch gantries only once they reach the pad. That's not what I want to focus on here, though it is important. I want to talk about the life cycle of a rocket before it reaches the pad. Barring flight delays, and I thought this was really interesting. I guess it's something that's like, it's true if you think about it on its face, but it just kind of took me by surprise. A Soyuz rocket will only be assembled for like 2 to 3 days. It arrives in Baikonur in pieces, and then it gets assembled, and then it returns to pieces within minutes of liftoff.
Yeah. It's in one piece for a bit.
Yes. Yeah. It is assembled. It is disassembled for the vast majority of its life.
It's a mechanical Sandman doll in a way.
And it's delivered to Baikonur in pretty much the exact same pieces it breaks up into, stages. The MIK assembly building at Site 31 takes delivery of a main stage, 4 boosters, an upper stage, and a payload that has hopefully already been sealed in a fairing for flight. Hopefully. The asterisk there is because of Roscosmos quality control.
Yikes.
Yeah. They're integrated horizontally, so the rocket is like, it's lying on its side. They're lifted onto a special train, and then it's a quick 750-meter ride out to the pad, which I don't know how fast they normally send the train, but I checked, and that's a 7-minute walk.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't think you can just notch 8 this thing.
No, or maybe you can.
And every single one of those stages was actually manufactured more than 1,500 kilometers away and shipped all the way across the Kazakh desert by train. I know that sounds slightly less impressive after we just talked about how like every single shuttle booster piece was like, you know, all of that intricate stuff, sending it across the mountains of Utah.
But ultimately, it's a relatively dumb system. It's not like it has turbo pumps. You put the putty in the tube and send it.
But then again, like we talked about, the mass considerations on sending liquid-fueled rockets are a lot less of a deal. You know, like these are being sent empty. They're only fueled once they're on the pad. You just kind of have to worry about like, don't bonk it. Which, as we saw in that quote, was a problem.
You have to take into account every mechanical object's worst nightmare, vibration.
And sand, and heat, and a lot of abrasion, and the fact that it is broiling hot in the day and freezing cold at night. So your metal is constantly like, I'm sure every booster in Baikonur is constantly making like the creaking sounds like an old ship. If you're just standing next to it, it sounds like, you know, you hear the Red October submarine, like the hull popping sounds.
No, it's just enough temperature flux to give every Challenger mission crew member just the worst PTSD. Is that fucking ice I see?
I was just very quickly curious as to what the distance to 1,500 kilometers. What's impressive is genuinely impressive is the distance from like Titusville, you know, from basically KSC to Corinne, Utah is 3,800 kilometers.
Jesus.
So I didn't realize how, I was like, it'll be about similar. I forget how bloody massive the continental USA is. That's big.
So I am looking at the numbers, and I do have one number bigger later.
Okay.
So Russia and not the Soviet Union has the US beat then for longest train delivery of a rocket part. Now, there are a couple of main rocket manufacturing hubs in Russia, and they generally follow the template of old Soviet OKBs, kind of like the politicking and the connections and who's friends with who was a big part of dictating what design OKBs were paired up with which factory OKBs. At the same time, design OKB, so I should probably clarify that like OKB, Experimental Design Bureau, some of them were basically factories, some of them were basically engineering firms. There were also things called NIIBs that were separate from OKBs, and they were like pure science. So like if you're an astrophysicist, chances are you work at an NIIB. If you're an engineer, you might work at a design or a factory OKB. And at the same time, all of this gets blurred because they're constantly annexing and eating each other. And design OKBs would have in-house factories so that they could build prototypes. But then once they had a design they liked, they would send that off to a factory for mass manufacture.
This is the fun thing about FTL is that like 50% of FTL episodes are basically like Hearts of Iron 4, but just with OKBs.
Yeah.
I love those episodes when we get into the real political fun, and it kind of feels like this might be close to that one of those as well. So
originally, I have kind of had to come to grips with the fact that we are not an engineering podcast. Like very rarely do we talk about the actual engineering of a rocket. It's just the politics.
Well, I would argue that we are, because that's engineering. Engineering isn't nuts and bolts. That's the easy stuff. This is engineering, right?
It's managing a team and making sure that Sergei Korolev, great manager, also slept with one of his subordinate sisters. Probably not good for business. And it wasn't. They lost the moon race, possibly because of that.
Yeah, died when his ass exploded.
Yeah, by the end, it was the size of standard Soviet rail gauge. It was awful.
Exactly, yeah. He and the solid rocket booster, the explosion went down from the bottom.
Oh.
Just the two shaking hands.
Now, because everything Soviet, like every OKB, was state-run, factories could receive orders from the Kremlin to radically shift their jobs at the drop of a hat. Consider that, like, Sukhoi, Mikoyan, and Gurevich, like fighter jet, bomber, Tupolev, Antonov, all of these are like aircraft manufacturers. Those are also OKBs. They are technically in the same system as all of the space ones. And if they fucked up bad enough on making planes, they could get demoted to being like OKB 52's bitch. Which is what happened to Lavochkin.
Oops.
Yeah, which was an OKB that designed fighter planes in World War II and was then rolled into the space industry, made to work for OKB 52. And they actually kind of wound up being like every space probe that the Soviets ever made, like their Luna program, the Mars program, the Venus landers, all of these wind up being made by a failed OKB that used to make like prop planes. So like they actually they managed to like claw themselves out of it. They become independent from OKB 52 down the line, and they actually like they're still around and they're still making space probes. Others were not so lucky. Factory OKBs could also just be annexed by design OKBs. And anyway, like it broadly doesn't work that way anymore. Most OKBs now exist as what Russia calls unitary enterprises, which are kind of like state-run companies, but not quite in the same way. They're not as state-run as the OKBs were. However, a lot of those old connections, like those connections of this guy is friends with this guy, which means they're going to start working together, that eventually solidified into supply chains, and a lot of those still exist. So like OKB-1 turns into a company, the factory they're associated with turns into a company. They'll probably still keep working together just because it's the way things are set up. Vladimir Chalamet's old Proton rockets are manufactured in the Khrunichev rocket factory right in the center of Moscow, actually, 5 kilometers from St. Basil's Cathedral.
That's exactly where I would build rockets, is in the middle of a densely populated area.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially the rocket famous for being like all hypergolic.
The rocket that I have said multiple times before has the mandate of hell.
The stages then have to make a 2,600 kilometer journey by train to Baikonur, the only site that can fly Proton rockets. And I make a point of this one with the Proton because the Proton looks like it has little boosters on the side. It doesn't. It has a lower stage and an upper stage. And unlike the Soyuz, whenever it gets sent on a train, it sends like one booster. It spreads them out a little bit. The Proton doesn't have that. They just send the entire fucking rocket, which makes it a lot harder to transport because it's huge. With its new and like fantastically delayed, like if you think SLS is bad, this rocket, Angara, puts it to shame. Russia is trying to achieve launch independence. They don't want to keep using Baikonur because Kazakhstan keeps charging them money for it.
As they rightly bloody should.
You don't get to fuck around in my backyard. You pay me.
You took this from us. We took it back. Leave us alone.
Yes.
Oh, you want to come back? We will charge you. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay. Other thing that we are definitely going to talk about is, you know, those famous pictures of like a guy snuck in and he found the Buran orbiter abandoned in like its big hangar. That is actually owned by, I believe, like a Kazakh billionaire, and he will only give it back to Russia if they give him the skull of like his. Like he believes, I can't remember which Khan, but he believes that he is descended from a Khan and that Russia is hiding the skull from him of his ancestor,
some real shit,
and he wants it back, and he is holding a Buran shuttle hostage until he gets it.
Gun to the head of a shuttle.
There's probably nothing more post-Soviet than this.
No, he's gonna turn that skull into a cup.
You guys have seen that picture of like Tibetan Mongolian gangster after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? Like just this incredibly dripped out dude with an AK. That is who I am picturing. Like holding the Buran hostage.
Doing that guy doing like reverse phrenology to justify his, cool.
I don't know.
Oh my.
What would be funnier is if it turned out to be true and there's just some like incredibly obvious facial feature. You look at the guy and then you look at the skull and everyone present just has to be like, oh yeah, no, like they're absolutely related.
It's got like a double bum chin or something.
I know exactly how he got his head staved in, and that's it.
The only man with a bony double chin.
It's just completely ossified from getting punched in the face.
So the Angara, it had its first few rockets built at the Khrunichev factory in Moscow, but they are trying to cut costs by shifting production to the Siberian city of Omsk. And if you want to guess how this cuts cost, it's not on travel. It's because Moscow workers are expensive and workers from the middle of Siberia aren't. It's kind of like a Ukraine war tactic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't send the Moscow people.
Yeah. I know those guys. I don't want to piss them off. I don't know those. I don't know them. Do what you like with them.
Yeah.
They want skulls.
And I think like Angara it's been flying, quote unquote, since like 2015, I think, but it's flown like 4 times. It's an incredibly troubled program. And to get to the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in Russia's north, the stages have to travel 2,800 kilometers by train. But to get to the Vostochny Cosmodrome in Russia's far east, they need to travel 5,000 kilometers.
There we go.
Yeah.
Russian dominance,
across
Soviet
Siberia.
anthem plays. Let's do this. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
The main factory I want to talk about, though, is the oldest and most storied, the Progress Plant number 1 in the industrial city of Samara, aka, as it's known today, Progress Rocket Space Center. This thing only ever has really stupid names, which we will get to in a second.
Yeah.
This is the prime manufacturer of every variant in the long line of Soyuz boosters. They are only ever made here in this factory, all the way back to the original R7 missiles. Because of how OKBs work, they're traditionally associated with OKB-1 under Korolev, and were generally his go-to for getting new designs built. This is also true in their bespoke line of satellites, all of which are based on old Vostok spacecraft, like the things that carried Yuri Gagarin and the first cosmonauts into orbit. Even to this day, they still make satellites, and every single one of them is based off of a 75-year-old spacecraft design.
It's like a bud don't break type situation. If I'm going to bring it back to trains, it's like, we've got the chassis. It's space certified. It's fine.
Yeah. And it kind of works because when you think about it, the Vostok is just a big empty sphere and you can just fill it with shit. The first Soviet spy satellite was just, all right, let's take the seat out and let's put a camera in.
Like, it is the most efficient volume. Like, it's the most efficient way to carry that.
I'm not criticizing. It works. And again, like, they still fly today. They've been like heavily modernized. Like the Soviet Union's first intelligence gathering, like military electronic satellites, they are all just Vostoks with the seat ripped out and a bunch of shit shoved in. The Bion animal probes that we talked about, the ones where they're doing the rat flights, those are Vostoks.
Yep. Also, it makes a lot of sense. Just mass manufacture these bloody things. And then you've got, like, okay, how do you make space cheap? Number 1, you let the apartheid South African guy make a whole bunch of expensive reusable rockets. Option number 2, you fucking mass manufacture this shit to the point where it costs, logistics of it is more expensive than the manufacturing process.
Get behind it, yeah.
And it especially makes sense because OKB-1, like this factory, Progress Factory, they don't really design stuff on their own. They're not a design OKB. OKB-1 is, and they have put all this time and effort into designing the Vostok spacecraft, and then the Vostok program ends after 6 manned launches. And they just have the design and they've got nothing to do with it. So they give it to the factory and they say, here, play with this. And the factory people do. They just start cramming shit into it and they start filling new contracts for like the Soviet military. They start doing international science flights by just cramming shit into this old design.
What a hell of an idea. Just play with this.
You've got clipping switched on KSP. You attach the science modules to the outside and then you clip them onto the inside of the module.
Oh yeah. No, I have never cheated and done that in KSP. I have never hidden ailerons inside my rocket because they look dumb, but I need them for it to fly. I've never hidden batteries.
Are we gonna have like a sit down? It sounds like you've been doing these things, buddy.
No, didn't you hear me explicitly said he didn't do those things?
Yeah.
He's on record. He put it into a microphone, and no one lies when they say stuff into microphones.
And you guys all heard the correct sound bite to say how correct it was. So, like the rockets it would produce, the factory started off more than 1,000 kilometers away. It was founded in 1894 in Moscow, making German bicycles.
Incredible. I love it.
In 1909, it shifted to aviation, becoming the Ducks.
I'm sorry to put in mid-fluke. I just had like a brick wrapped in seaweed hit me in the head. I'm just thinking like the Fatboy Slim, like Right Here, Right Now, like music video, but it's not animal. It's not the like ahistoric. It's like the bicycle comes out the swamp, and then the bicycle turns into like a quadmobile, and then that thing turns into like biplane, and then flipping, and it's a rocket. I love this. It's beautiful.
They do. They go from land to air to space in that order.
Yeah. Someone do not do that with AI. Someone actually creative go out there and create us right here, right now, but with OKB1.
And the best part, we will be changing the name. We will be making sure that the name is proper for each one, because once they become an aviation plant, they become known as the Ducks plant. And like, I was surprised by this. This is 1909, so like flight is still kind of a new thing. There are not exactly a lot of planes.
Yeah, by like single-digit years.
Yes.
What? Yeah.
Like basically the first mass-produced French biplane, they buy the license for it and they start producing it in Russia.
What's the name of that plant again?
Ducks. It's either, I've seen different spelling of it. It's either DUKS or DUX. I don't know what they were called when they were making bicycles.
No, you just reminded me of one of the scuffed French ramjet prototypes. The Lindy.
Well, the specifically the plane that they were making was the Farman 3. Whenever they first got started. Yeah.
Not the Close Man?
Well, not after it's taken off, anyway.
After the revolution, the factory again changed its name to become State Aviation Plant Number 1. Over the next few decades, it kept its focus on planes, though it did change its name a few more times. First, it was Gaz Number 1 Aviakim, and then it became Plant Number 1 Stalin.
That's such hubris. Personally, I love this called Gaz Number 1. That's me. I'm Gaz Number 1. But then Plant Number 1 Stalin. Just be like, hey, we could just... Do you reckon this would give us a leg up if we just say, like Plant Number 1 Stalin? He seems to be he's the guy.
Stalin just like reading through a list. He's just like, well, Stalin also loved competitions. That is one of the things that he actually imparted into the Soviet Union, especially in like military and scientific development, is making people have to compete for shit. And he liked like personally intruding and picking winners. So I can fully see him just like, oh, we're building that plane right there. He's going through. He sees his name. I like the cut of these guys' jibs.
It's got the number 1 in it, and it's got my name in it. I'm sold.
I like your funny words.
Number 1 factory, Stalin number 1, favorite factory 1.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, like the factory is just named like shitfuck 1 KSP, brackets this time for sure.
How did you know what my heavy lift platform is called?
So, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the factory was evacuated east to the city of Kaibyshev. It's now called Samara, and it was quickly rebuilt into the largest aviation factory in the country. They were number 1 Stalin 1 factory favorite. While they built many designs for many OKBs, their specialty was the IL-2 Sturmovik, basically the World War II equivalent of the A-10 Warthog, just a flying fucking tank.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about how cool these guys are. Like, I cannot stress, they make a massive contribution to the war. They make 12,000 of these things in 3 years.
It's funny. It's the Sturmovik is like, it looks like a bolt and pull Defiant. It looks like one of the aircraft that didn't do very well that the British made.
The Defiant was the one that had the quad 303s in a turret, right?
Yeah, in a turret that you couldn't face. It basically like it just got it was bad.
To be able to do anything, you had to be basically getting shot first.
Correct. Yes, that's right. You had to die before you could achieve your mission objectives. But what the trick was, Britain hadn't realized this one clever trick, which was make 12,000 of them.
Yeah, and build a steel bathtub for the dude to sit in.
Yeah, what you do is you just plug these things at scale in numbers at the target until the mission objectives have been achieved.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Now, after the war, Factory Number 1 tried to keep with the times. Prop planes gave way to advanced MiG-15 jet fighters and Il-28 bombers. Though it was slapped in the middle of nowhere, Kaibyshev was quickly growing into a thriving industrial hub. And that is when, in 1957, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev got rocket-pilled, and everything went to shit immediately. I cannot stress enough, this one decision is going to ruin this city.
God.
We have talked about how enthusiastic Khrushchev was about his new toys after Sputnik first flew. We have talked about the dramatic cuts to the Soviet military funding that came with that, like aircraft carriers and battle cruisers that were like 99% finished, sold for scrap. Tank factories being shuttered, tens of thousands of actual soldiers of the Red Army just being discharged and sent home. We've talked about how the culture of Soviet war changed overnight because suddenly every procurement guy, every designer, every general knows that if you want to get a weapon approved, it has to have missiles on it because the boss likes missiles now. That's why, like, suddenly the Soviet plans to have aircraft carriers to counter the US go away, and suddenly every Soviet ship is bristling with cruise missiles now.
Don't worry, I'll light this bottle rocket off in your direction. You're not going to like what happens next.
12 trillion rubles sent your way immediately. Dmitry Ustinov is going to show up at your door and demand a prototype in 2 weeks.
You're going to get black bagged, dragged off to a facility, make the fucking rocket now.
My favorite thing about Dmitry Ustinov, he had all kinds of different jobs. Sometimes he was Minister of Defense. Sometimes he was like Minister for Arms or whatever, or just a general. He was basically the guy fully in charge of the Soviet space and rocket program for 40 entire years, from like the mid 40s to the mid 80s. He didn't put much stock in rockets personally. He preferred guns. He preferred artillery and tanks. And the whole time he's just kind of like, fuck, I guess.
How about the fact that he lived? That's the shocking bit.
I don't want to delve too much into old episodes, but the fact that he, like, according to the myths, heard that Chalamet died and then just immediately died himself.
Yeah, he's like, I'm done. I'm signing off. I'm signing out. Auf Wiedersehen.
He's gone.
Gotta take it back. That is like real generational hater energy.
Two souls slap fighting on the way to hell.
Yeah.
He's coming in with the steel chair.
Do you have a hotter level? I want to go there because he's not there.
Yeah.
Their personal hell is heaven, but it's just the two of them there.
Yeah, their personal hell is just each other. He's there in hell waiting with a cue ball in a sock.
What we have not talked about is the dramatic effect all of this had on the factories and bureaus of the Soviet military-industrial complex.
Oh, okay.
The largest manufacturer of weapons in the world has suddenly been told to, like, no, fuck all of that. We're doing something new. Shortly after Sputnik's flight, Factory Number 1 was ordered to prepare for serial production of Korolev's new R-7 ballistic missiles, to abandon all aircraft manufacturing, and to be ready for 1959. This is late 1957.
Retool your entire kit. Yeah, from nothing.
In a year, retool the largest aircraft factory in the Soviet Union away from aircraft and toward a weapon that had only flown, like the actual R-7 missile, not counting the Sputnik flight, had, I believe by this point, 2 successful flight tests. It had like 10 failed ones. This thing is still in testing. It's not ready.
That's the fucking rub, though. It's done it twice. It'll do it a third.
This is just, I think we are getting increasingly close to this. I had it written as a funny joke, but like, I fully expect Trump could just declare to like Lockheed and Boeing, like, you're building lasers now.
You're building battleships.
I want them done by next year.
Yeah, and you're putting them on my big warship that I want to build.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, no planes. No planes. God. They didn't work in Iran. We're not doing those.
Quinn, taking this back to Hearts of Iron, this is like you're playing the Soviets. It's 1939 and Germany's about to invade and you're on your factory schema where you have the, what is it, like the condensed factory one? So that's the one that's extra slow to gain the production efficiency speed. Because like when you change a factory's thing, it simulates that retooling by just dumping the efficiency that it has.
Yeah, because like all that time is being spent.
So I want to scrap my entire arms industry and have them produce like, I don't know, 1 rocket a year.
Yeah.
that factory, like I was looking at Sturmovik numbers. It was the most produced aircraft and still is in history. Like, in total, not all of them were made at this factory, at factory number 111 hashtag 1.
Yeah,
but like there were like 43,000 of these things made or something. Like, so yeah, you just say, right, stop that. Now make a demissile. Yeah, okay, cool.
Let me just look this up because they produced 12,000 Sturmoviks in 3 or 4 years. Let me look up how many R-7 missiles are produced total.
For reference, like a very popular plane in the United States for just like regular civilian fuckery, the Cessna 172, just about as stereotypical you can get is if a kid drew a plane, that's what they're drawing on a napkin. 44,000 4,000 of those. And that's almost similar fucking numbers.
The thing that replaces the Sturmovik.
Yeah.
They're like, Khrushchev at the time is famously saying, like, my factories will churn these rockets out like sausages, and they produce less than 30 total.
The sausages.
Oh my God.
of the actual R7 Semyorka missile, because the R7 is a piece of shit as a weapon, and Korolev knew that, and he only cared about the rocket as a launcher and not a weapon. And they still go through with it. They revamp, they retool, they become a missile factory, and then they very quickly stop, because the actual R7, it, like, almost immediately, people realize Korolev's con. They realize that, like we've talked about this, anytime the generals go out to watch this thing get launched, they're all like looking at their watches in the videos, because they're like, yo, this thing takes like 24 hours to get ready to launch. Like, if the Americans want to nuke us, there is no way this thing is getting off the ground.
It's brilliant. It is such a brilliant. He's like, these stupid fools. I've pulled the wool over their eyes. What I'm going to get is one of the most successful families of space flight vehicles, of space launch vehicle platform. I'm going to do it off the back of the initial gullibility of a bunch of Soviet generals, and all credit to him. It was great. It's great work.
And it's hilarious. Because, and you make a good point there. You predict something that's coming up, because as soon as this factory, like, they realize pretty quickly, oh, the R7 is not the weapon we need. We need to tone down production of this. The factory is left with all of this R7 producing hardware. They're left with an assembly line for making these missiles, but the army doesn't want the missiles. So Korolev comes back to them and says, like, you know what you could make? You could make Soyuz rockets for me. You could keep all the same hardware. You can just move over to making my thing.
Yeah.
How convenient.
So, like,
see that.
Von Braun is significantly more evil by far, but in terms of ambition, Korolev has him beat so bad, because Korolev dismantled a huge chunk of the Soviet military-industrial complex just to get his way, and I love it.
Yeah, one guy literally put his neck on the line, and the other one is the glorified prima donna of rocketry. Like.
Now, not all of this shift went smoothly. I'm kind of blurring the timelines a little bit here. Like, from this point on, the Progress factory, it takes on the name Progress in 1966. It still sometimes it's still the number one. It gains different stupid names over time, and eventually it kind of settles back on Progress. It becomes the main manufacturer for, like, first the Vostok launcher, then the Molnaya launcher, Luna launcher, like, all of these different variants of the Soyuz booster come out of Progress.
They all come back.
Yes. And crucially, because they are associated with OKB-1, because they are the guys who build anything that OKB-1 designs, they get rolled into the N1 program. Yes. And they do. They build all of the test rockets. They build all the test articles. They set up test stands in Samara so that they can actually do on-site testing and not have to ship, consider, like, I don't, that's why I was kind of pissed off about not finding as many details, because they did ship completed N1 stages by train.
Oh my God. What if rocket, but size of Empire State Building and cone?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine someone tipping one of these onto the ground? I'm pretty sure they would be shot.
And it was by stage, but these are still massively huge rockets.
No, Quinn, they would be shot. You would have the Soviet equivalent of the cadaver synod, and then the body would be shot again.
And it took a couple of years for, like, the knock-on effects of retooling an entire manufacturing city overnight to kind of happen, but things did not go smoothly.
Ooh.
Like, the biggest problem for the city of Kaibyshev is that before, they were feeding the Soviet military, arguably the most, like, hungry institution on the planet for manufactured goods. And even going full blast, even as crazy as the space race is, even with all this stuff being built up, building rockets just can't compete. And there's only one, like, all of the factories in town have been told to stop making aircraft, or, like, they were all making aircraft engines and then sending them to the factory.
Yeah, the whole city is just like an enormous complex web of supply chain feeding number one factory 111 #1 Stalin.
Final.
Yeah, final .docx. Yeah, exactly.
Just all right. Well, I'm gonna make art of their logo and their flag now.
Yeah. Art of their logo, but not the actual logo, just what that logo looks like in Windows Explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Please, oh God, don't crash this time.
So like, even if they're going full out, even at the absolute peak and height of, like the Soviet space dominance in the 80s, they can't keep everyone working. There is not enough work. They're not making 12,000 Sturmoviks anymore.
Yeah, it's the absolute basics of the scalable basics of factory logistics of if you have lots and lots of the same thing going through, working their way through the production line,
yes,
then you have lots of people working on the production line. If the thing is small and very repetitive, then lots of people are working on that production line. You have 7 or 8 guys around the one thing multiplied by 100, 200, 300. In this case, there's one thing. There's only so many guys you can have standing around one thing.
Exactly, yeah. And crucially, the whole point of using rockets, one of the things that Khrushchev loved about them was that he thought that they would be cheaper in the long run because the Soviet Union is going through an economic downturn at this point. This is his attempt to turn things around. He wants to cut the fat, and he believes that he can make a handful of rockets and intimidate the world with it, and then he doesn't need as big of an army. But that critically means that a city built on feeding that army is suddenly out of work. Sergei Korolev had personally, accidentally triggered a massive economic downturn and a colossal employment crisis in a city of almost 1 million people.
Oh, crikey. So, yeah, okay.
Jesus
that's like a city the size
Christ.
of, well, in the case of all the Brits listening to this, that's like a city the size of Leeds being switched off, basically.
Or Ottawa.
Ottawa, yeah.
This is what I mean whenever I said earlier that I think this is the biggest case of this is Sergei Korolev putting thousands of people out of work. No one dies, but he completely ruins a city.
The man doesn't give a fuck. He just wants his boys to be in orbit.
I do want to chime in to state that that's more people than the entire population of my state.
Yeah, so
destitution
if
now.
Elon Musk convinced the governor of your state that you guys were going to be entirely a rocket factory and that every other job was invalid, that is approaching what we are talking about here.
And then I would be forced to work in the rocket factory.
Oh dear.
So
the FTL promise: you will witness destitution on a scale you've hitherto not been able to conceive of.
And we do hold up space exploration as something that does give back economically. The famous figure of I believe $14 gain for every $1 spent on NASA. That does not hold true for the people of Samara, Russia.
Does not apply here. Yeah,
Yes.
No.
Even worse, Kybyshev was a closed city.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
We've talked about these a bit before. These are cities that house important military sites or factories or stuff like that. You want to keep spies away from them, which means that they all have strict entry, travel, and residency controls. There are checkpoints to get in and out. If you want to go into a closed city to visit your family, you need a permit. If you want to go on a vacation from your job, so you work at a satellite factory, you want to go on a vacation. Where are you vacationing? Florida? No, you go back to work.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, this is not good.
Yes, which means that if you are unemployed in a closed city, a closed city that you're existing in relies on you having a top secret priority job.
And because one
fucked.
chode inevitably decides to turn the lights off.
Wait, yeah, you have a top secret job. It's well, where's your resume?
Yeah.
If you tell them, you get black bagged immediately.
I had an NDA. I can't tell you.
No, that also
Sure
turns
you did,
into
buddy.
the what is it? What's this gap in your resume? I can't say.
It's
What do you
just
mean?
black
I
highlighted
signed
out.
an NDA.
Yeah, you are unemployed in the Papers, Please city because Sergei Korolev has convinced everybody no rockets now.
Your only option is just committing theft until you get airholed by I don't know, the local KGB.
Yeah, Georgie had the right idea. That's why Georgie's such a cool guy. That's why I recognize the nation of Cobra-stan.
Where's your passport? There it is, mate. It's great.
I see.
Absolutely. Korolev, I get you're a man with vision.
He put us in space.
Oh boy. Yeah.
But don't worry, he has a solution. Quoting from the book The Challenge to Apollo by space historian Asif Siddiqui. brackets best boy, partly because of general economic mismanagement and partially because of the downturn in the aviation industry stemming from Khrushchev's abrupt about turn in favor of missiles. Plants and subcontractors in the region were unable to cope with Korolev's orders. Korolev personally appealed to several high-level Communist Party administrators at Kybyshev to offer all the assistance they could. As a result of their actions, as many as 28 different industrial firms located in and around Kybyshev were brought into the N1 program. Many of these institutes, plants, or design bureaus had earlier been involved in producing parts for aircraft, but had lost all their orders and thus means of existence in recent years. The N1 program literally became the provider for the entire Kybyshev region.
Oh no.
Region, not just.
Oh no.
Yes. Not only does this mean that Kybyshev, the city, is fucked when the N1 fails in like the program's canceled in like the early 70s.
The taint is spreading wider.
Yeah, it means that it damages the N1 program. He kind of like F-35s it. He spreads it out so wide across so many different contractors. A lot of them, there's a really good drawing, I'll post it on Blue Sky, of like, none of these contractors know what the final product is. A lot, like even the ones that know that they are working on a rocket don't know what the rocket looks like. So there's a really good photo. There's a concept drawing, design drawing of like a fuel delivery system for the launch pad. And the rocket that it is delivering fuel to looks nothing like an N1 whatsoever. Yeah. It looks like some sci-fi bullshit because they're just like, I don't know. They haven't told me what it looks like.
Yeah. And on the Tintin rocket, or like this thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And again, others just didn't know they were working on a rocket. They're just making pumps now. That's kind of all I've got for this. Like, there's no, like, the continued story, things do get better for Kybyshev, for Samara as things go on. It is still around today, but like, it stops being this aviation economic powerhouse and kind of just becomes the rocket town. To give you an idea, the population kind of flatlines. I think it's at like 1.1 million, and it was at like 900,000 in 1960. You know, Oof. They are not thriving.
Yeah, literally like rip the heart out of that city. Yes. Again, reiterate, massive city. Cool. Logistics, supply chains.
And it goes to hell.
But Progress Factory, like the factories that couldn't survive are now gone because brackets Sergei Korolev completely destroyed the aviation industry in an entire city. At square brackets, the largest aviation plant in the Soviet Union, thus crippling the Soviet Air Force, their main manufacturing hub, and a million people's job prospects. And at the same time, he winds up watering down his own N1 program by making it a make-work program to apologize for bankrupting a city. Wow. I love this fucking moron.
And all this, you discover this chaos, Quinn, because you had to do the train rocket episode and we're looking at logistics and then just got sidetracked into that time Korolev destroyed a city. Amazing. Yeah. Incredible. I love it.
Yeah, like Samara's still around today. It's making the Soyuz 2 now, I believe, unless it's recently launched, I believe the Soyuz 5 variant is going to launch very soon, unless it launched like yesterday or something.
Very soon, TM.
Brackets, yes.
Very soon.
But yeah, that is for our side, the story of how the main Soviet rocket factory came to be and how it ruined a city in the process.
Almost ruined a city by design.
I know. And how none of any of it had anything to do with the bottoms of horses.
Yes, tragic.
Horse ass.
If only.
Quinn, that was amazing. I love that so much.
Yes, and thank you so much for the section that you wrote. Thank you so much for educating us on the NASA Railroad. That is something that I didn't know about. It's super interesting, especially the horse ass stuff. Listener, you clicked on a thumbnail of a horse's ass. So, clearly you're into all this stuff.
Yeah, you're into that kind of thing, right? Well, look, people are into detailed knowledge of asses because they have been listening to FTL and we all know a lot about Korolev's ass.
Yes.
So it's that kind of podcast, folks.
I wish there were more medical details. I wish that I wish that they had figured out when it had started and, like when it got bad so that I could just add like brackets anytime we mention Korolev, like he's 2 years in at this phase. It's about a centimeter across.
What is this going to be like seconds from disaster with the countdown?
Yeah, that's literally, you need a bonus, you need a Patreon-only episode that is like the seconds from disaster countdown to the collapse of his internal organs out of his anus.
Except it's rising and it's just polyp count.
He's entered stage 2 hemorrhoids. He is clearly escalating.
Doing the biography, it's like, now, little Sergei Korolev, brackets, no polyps yet at this point, was born
it's
in
like people
Ukraine.
put like parts per million of carbon in their like Twitter profile.
By percentage by mass.
Oh, God.
All right. Well, yeah, we're talking a lot about asses right now.
But no, I have to interject, though. At the end of your section, Gareth, we're talking about, how, okay, cool, the, United States railroad system has just atrophied to the point of shock. I'm just imagining them tipping a loaded SRB off of a train and it just going off into the horizon at Mach 2.
Just accidentally igniting it and just rocketing up the Utah mountain straight into the sky.
Who needs the pointy fairing at one end? Just light the thing and go. It's
Utah,
beautiful.
Thiokol accidentally inventing a mass driver.
It's got enough thrust. It's just going to hammer the air into submission anyways.
I mean, there are enough photos of like Boeing sending fuselages that then get ditched by one of the class ones, and just like a bunch of immaculate Boeing like aircraft fuselages that have been visibly wrecked, like 747 or other fuselages. You're like, no, oh god. Actually, it's not. It's the 777s. I think there's a very famous picture of like a 777 fuselage that has just absolutely hit the deck from a derailment and is wrecked. Thankfully, they didn't do that with an SRB because, as you say, Chris, pop, boom, wee.
Getting passed on the interstate by a rocket doing, 1,200 miles
doing
an
like
hour.
Operation Plowshare shit to like Eastern Utah. Yeah. Oh, God.
I'd thought of it before, but I just didn't bring it up. Of like, I wonder if that's why Sea Dragon failed. Of like the rail lobby shut them down because Sea Dragon was going to use. They were going to go with the lagoon method. They were going to have the pure water rocket lagoon.
Oh my God! Can you imagine? They like empty the lagoon. The train carries the thing out, and then they refill the lagoon again for the. That's it. Oh my God.
Gareth, I was going to ask you, though I have the tendency to get walked over in conversations. I'm very passive, but what do you think that guy's doing now? Like, is he still lying on the internet about
horse ass?
Yeah, I don't know.
About horses' asses or rail gauges, or
because he kind of disappeared, like because he just copy pasted an email thread from like AOL onto Twitter, and then it went big viral, and then a few people. Well, I challenged it, and then my challenge to it went fairly big, and then he kind of hit the dirt at that point, and who knows?
Yeah, he realized someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about fired back at him.
Well, what's funny is that I was like, P-Way, what track went viral when I was moving house? It's like the one time when I would absolutely be on fire on Twitter, and Bill Holohan Solar on the Twitter killed it until I arrived and like started, and a few others were like, I'm not sure about this. Yeah, sad times. No, I don't know what he's doing. Who knows? Who knows where these weird Twitter people go? Quinn, I've had so much fun. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on. Is there any place people can find your stuff that you'd like to point them to?
Yeah, Railnatter is on YouTube. It's a video podcast that's a video first, then a podcast after. So it has lots of moving parts, including me being out on location, pointing and poking things. So Railnatter. You just go find it on my YouTube, youtube.com/GarethDennisTV. And yeah, I have Patreons, all the usual stuff, the kind of the circular economy of like, Patreons that people pay to other people's patrons. As a Patreon subscriber to FTL, come to that. Railnatter is a lot of fun. It's live most of the time, so you can actually come into the chat and get involved and ask questions as it goes, which is unique because I have so much other stuff going on, I wouldn't be able to record it otherwise. But yeah, there's that. I have a book, How the Rails Will Fix the Future, where I talk about a few things similar to this story, actually. But yeah, mostly Railnatter, the book also. But no, it's been an absolute delight and pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. And listener, you will find all of the links down below, so make sure to follow up on that.
It's always fun to work out where an ass ends up. And in this case, we don't know. Maybe revisit in a future episode, we'll find out what happened to that guy.
Yes. And until that next episode, listener, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Bye.
Thank you to everyone who has signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are Asha Rin, Boss, Kataiga Reptile, Charlie, Comrade Sleepy Bro, Daniel F, General Incoherent Screaming, Graham E, Jesselyn T, Jorg 2, Speculative Revolution, Joss, Kamo, Lane of the Wired, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Murray Motorsports, Mysterious Stranger, Oil Drum, Pat, Paul C., Rare Scrungle Spingus 3rd Edition, Skylab Bricks, Source Force, Spectre Cohen, Tortilla Baron, Vivek D., and Wingsmith. Our space dogs are a Union Thug, A. Blinken, Akiogo, Aerial Badger Release, Agent Carter, Alex, Alice N., Andrew K., Angie, Angry Old Man Yada Yada, Anthony C., Arlen S., Atomic Hobbit, Autofox, Avocado Assassin, Baron M., Batthey, Ben L., By Barbarian, Big Meg, Binary Badger, Beanie, Boomzilla, Boring Brian, Boog, C., Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charlotte M., Chris K., Christian K., Clay M., Cole C., Captain Lag, Cynical Scribble, Daddy Bongo, Daniel, Darth Baby, David L., Does Smiley, Dom K., Drain Damage, Dr. Shockmaster, Duke of New York, Enk, Aaron, Eric J., FBH, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, George B., Grant K., Griffin, former snow shoveler of Burger King, Heiko S., Howl's Moving Pictures by Rush. I heard Stephen Miller is a pedophile. Isn't that crazy? I hope you have a good day. Ian R., Iggy Naramis, JMM, James A., James C., James T., Jamie K., Jarl Breadmaker, Jerry M., Jedediah D., Joanne's Man, Miss You Forever, John C., John E., John Boy D., Johnny Terrors, Jonathan G., Jonathan W., Johntastic 20x6, Joseph R.H., Just Morse, Kate B., Kate D., King Bun, Corbin the Dog, Cruzzy, Lartan1337, Lenswipe, Liliana, Lorgath, Luke O, Alexon's PC, Majestic Affect, Man Who Is Average, Mar, Marigold Muskrat, Marto, Mechgirl Alley, Michael C, Michelin Star Blemtro, Mish, Mr. Dr. John, Moomin Instrumentality Project, Narrow Ebb, Nelly W, New Name, Nicholas S, Nick, Nick S, Norman W, Northeast Driver, NSFW NSA, Outlook Cov, Panda, Pat S, Patron, Petey, Poop Butt, Pop Vector, Randall, Ray H, RBK, Rayto B, Riley, Robert G, Sailor of Fortune, Scott K, Sean F, Sean H, Sensual Kazoo, Sean P, Silly Vixen, Skyhawk, Something, Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, Starlight Foxalope, Strone Ahoan works for a Captain Planet villain, Swanee, The Best Sean, Thomas M, Tim P, Toasty Ken, Trash D, Arash T, Frisk, Will W, William O, William P, Winston P, Vouter S, Zachary JB, Zaf, Zemo, Zim, and Zombie Dwarf. Albert Count, 221. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we're Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.